Hi, Kim and Maddie. All right, this is your video of how to bake bread. So the first step is your yeast and getting it in a liquid. So I've already measured out my yeast and I have it in this bowl here. And I have my water. And so some recipes just have water and some have water and milk. It just needs a liquid. So water, obviously, but if you have milk, you can certainly put it in as well. And so the first step is just the liquid and the yeast and giving it like 20 or 30 minutes for the yeast to activate. Ideally, the water is lukewarm, which means I put my finger in and I just don't even feel it really. It doesn't feel cold, doesn't feel hot, you just don't feel it. If it is a touch too hot, you will kill the yeast and nothing will rise, and I've done it. And so don't let it be too hot. Too cold is fine. The yeast will just take a little longer to activate, but it's fine. It just won't be as fast. So I've got my water and my yeast, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour it in. And then the other thing you can add to this is sugar. And I'm doing a little different recipe than I'd sent you. But you can certainly add sugar to this as well because it likes the yeast, and it'll help it kind of grow. So first step is just my yeast, water, and sugar. And then I leave it out for about 30 minutes. And Logan and I are gonna bike down to Bagel Bakery. And when I come back, it will have ballooned up and I'm ready for the next step. Okay, we're back. Now, what we did before, it's been about an hour. And here is our yeast. So take a look. It has ballooned up, so that is great. It's looking beautiful. There's a lot of steps in baking bread, but the lovely part is there's not a lot of time limit to it. So you just want it to balloon up. And if it balloons up and you forgot and it sits for 2 or 3 hours, that's fine. Then you can go to the next step. Usually you only need to do 30 minutes. I think it was about an hour or so that we were gone on our Bagel Bakery adventure. And so now we're doing the next step. And this is the biggest, most time-consuming step, but it's not that time-consuming. Baking bread is really good for these days where you're working from home because there's lots of little steps where you have to come in and do something throughout the day, but they're nice, easy breaks. So you take all the rest of your ingredients and you add them together, and it doesn't really matter the order, except that you want to make sure if there's anything hot that you don't kill your yeast, because you still can kill it even though it's ballooned up and it's blossoming lovely. In this particular recipe I'm making, I actually boil some milk with butter, half of it, and then half of it's cold. So I'm very careful when I add it, and then I make sure I add the cold stuff, and then I make sure it's not too hot. And if it is, then I will wait to add my yeast mixture because I don't want to kill that yeast. So I'm gonna mix it around, and I wash my hands really good because the next step is where you really get your hands in there. And then I've also been scrubbing down the countertop here with a wet paper towel, not with cleaning solution because I didn't really want to get chemicals into my bread, but scrubbing it with just a wet paper towel. But the nice thing is, obviously you want to have clean hands and a clean counter. But even if germs got into this, the last step is baking. So all of those germs are going to be killed when you do the baking step. So I wouldn't panic too much about being absolutely the most sanitary possible. So I've got this mixed up. I'm gonna take my very clean finger, and I'm feeling confident that that feels lukewarm and not killing yeast warm. So I'm going to take my mixture. I forgot this step one time. I literally mixed everything together and my yeast sat in the bowl, and then I kneaded it and I had it all ready, and then I saw it and I about cried and had to mix it all in, which was kind of a pain. So don't forget your yeast and water mixture. All right, so now I've got them, and then the last thing I need to add is flour.
Mom, your spoon.
Okay, well that's gross. So now I've got this in here, and then my last step is flour. And for this one, there's 8 cups of flour. So like I said, this is a little different recipe than what I sent you. It's a little more complex recipe. If your first one goes good, then I'll share this recipe. So I do 4 and 4, 4 whole wheat, 4 white, because I like to get the whole wheat into it, which is healthier. But if you do all whole wheat, then it's rough. It's not great tasting. Okay, why don't you pause it, Rory? So I've been adding the flour. My recipe calls for 8 cups. I have added 7 in here, and I have my 8th right here on the side. And the first step is just to mix it with the spoon because I had all the liquid below. I definitely hand mix all of this. There's no need for an electric mixer for this. For yours, I think it was a 4 cup of flour. I would put all in, but maybe half a cup, and hold a half a cup aside. So whether it's half a cup or a whole cup, you want to hold a little aside. You want to mix this up, and now I feel I need to wash my hands again because I just scratched my face.
Oh, go away.
All right, why don't you pause it for a minute? Clean my hands. All right, so I'm gonna take this flour that I had on the side and I'm gonna sprinkle it on my area here. And you can see I've kind of mixed in the flour as best I could. It's still a little liquidy because it's missing the last bit of flour. It's actually a little more liquidy than I expected, but you know, whatever the recipe says, you kind of go by feel, so you can always add more flour if you need to. If it calls for 4 and something, then, you know, go up by a little bit if it's not working well. So I'm gonna add a little more in here. And what we're doing is we're getting it mixed in well enough before we go to the hand and the kneading. So in order to really activate the yeast, you have to knead the bread. So now I'm gonna pour it all out here.
That does not look like dough.
It will. This part is really fun. It's very soothing, but there's definitely an art to kneading bread. So, got it out. And I've got my flour on the side, and now my camera operator will also be my flour adder.
Ooh, yay!
When we need it, because, so I'm just trying to incorporate it, and it's gonna stick to my fingers at first. You know that it's looking good when it's no longer sticking to your fingers. So you just kind of keep taking it off and putting it on. Rory, why don't you give me a sprinkle down here? You can go a little heavier than that. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna mix that over. All right. Okay, so kind of getting it there. I want to get the rest. I still have some goop in my bowl, and I'm getting it off my fingers. So I really just, all right, put it on my fingers. I do this a lot and just get it off. My hands were clean, so this is all good dough that we don't want to lose. And now in here, I'm going to pull out the rest and get it off my spoon. And because then I will be reusing this bowl for the bread to rise. So alright, that's about what I'm gonna get. Pull that off. Rory's gonna give me a sprinkle of flour on top. Okay, now for kneading the bread, you will take it and you'll push a side over like this, and you're always using your palms of your hands, and you just keep taking it and kneading it down. Okay, then you take the next side, like that, and you want to knead your bread for probably a good 6, 7, 8 minutes. Now it's sticking to me again, which means I need flour. Now, if I use up all the flour in there and it's still sticking to me, we will get more flour. Even though the recipe said 8 cups, you know, maybe I didn't measure my liquid well or something, and I added a little too much. Whatever the case, I go by feel, and that you don't want it to be sticking to you. And soon, you can do it without even flour down because it just doesn't stick. Rory, why don't you pour about half of that here in. Okay. You want to be careful, it's going to go everywhere. So we just keep kneading the bread. All right, you want to stop, Rory? All right, it's 2 o'clock. It's been 3 hours since we last checked in, and you can tell just by looking how it's poofed over a little bit. So if we look, beautiful rising. Oh, it is just turning out lovely. So what you do is you make a fist and you pop it. And it all goes down. Did you start? And that's it. So it goes in, we cover it up, and we come and check on it again in a couple hours. Here we are again. It's 4 o'clock now. I can see it's risen again. So I'm pulling it off. You can actually see where I punched it before. All right, so now we're at the step. Now you didn't have to do that twice. You only have to punch down once, and then you could go immediately to actually putting it in the pans if you wanted. But I like to do 2 risings. So if you have enough time, do that. So I'm gonna do some loaves and I'm gonna do some rolls, and I'll show you how that looks. So first I pan up this, and then I punch again, and I get it down. This step is really important, so you wanna make sure you have enough time that you're gonna put it in your pans and have at least an hour for it to rise. So when I do the rolls, I do 3. I do little balls, 3 little balls, and then they bake together, and then you can pull them apart. Anyway, it's just, they're great little roll. It's our little 3-ball rolls. So here's one of them, and you can see the size. And then I'll show you when I do a loaf, how much I put in. So I take a big old piece. I got my loaf pan greased up, and so I kind of knead it together a bit so I have a nice pretty, because I'm probably gonna want a little bigger than that. And you can see how small it is. Then it's gonna sit for an hour and it's gonna rise up. So if you just took it like this and you baked it, it would rise for sure because it's got yeast in it, but it would not rise as much as you want. If you let it sit in there for a good hour, hour and a half, it's gonna rise up a whole bunch, and then you bake it, it's just gonna be so airy. It's gonna be delicious. Okay, the bread is ready to rise again. You can see I made a bunch of rolls, and I have 2 little loaves and 1 good sized loaf. And you can see like it's pretty sunken in there. So it looks kind of dinky right now. Who would want to eat that? But you'll see how much it rises. You can see kind of, these are pretty low in the pan. All right, so now we wait at least an hour, hour and a half, something like that, and then we'll check them out. Near the end, the oven is preheating to 350, and they've been sitting here, and let's take a look. Oh, they've risen. They look beautiful. My loaf pans look great. So now we're gonna bake them at 350. I would guess the rolls will take maybe 12 to 15 minutes. The little loaves, maybe 18 to 20. And then the big one probably 25. So we will show you as they come out of the oven how to tell if it's done. Okay, you can see our finished bread here. The second it comes out, I use a knife and kind of down the sides, and I pop it out to make sure the inside, because you see they are all brown, so looks great, right? Looks cooked. So I just put it right back in and I let it cool. But this guy, look how brown he is on top. He looks done. But I did the same thing, and he's doughy. So he is going back in the oven. And that's the reason, especially on the big loaf pan, sometimes it's very deceptive, and if you let it cool too much, then you really can't put it back in. But I even do it on the rolls, so the second they come out, I check and I make sure that they're brown underneath, because I have definitely made doughy bread.